One dinner exposed her lies and made me rich. I had always prided myself on being a man of routine, a man who believed in the quiet strength of consistency. At 47, my life was a carefully curated mosaic of small, meaningful rituals. The morning coffee I brewed for Ellen before she woke, the way I always kissed her goodbye even if she was still half asleep, and the evenings spent in our modest but cozy living room, where the soft glow of the fireplace reflected off the silver-framed wedding photo on the mantel. That photo taken 22 years ago was my anchor, a reminder of the life we'd built together, the promises we'd made, and the love I still believed was unshakable. Tonight, like so many nights before, I sat on the couch, a glass of wine in hand, waiting for Ellen to finish her phone call in the other room. I didn't mind. I was used to her work running late, her voice carrying through the house as she wrapped up another day at the real estate office. I glanced at the photo album open on the coffee table, its pages filled with memories of our last vacation. A trip to the coast where we'd laughed over bad seafood and walked hand in hand along the shore. I traced the edge of a picture, my finger lingering on Ellen's smiling face, and felt a familiar warmth in my chest. This was my life, steady and sure, and I couldn't imagine it any other way. But as the sound of Ellen's laughter drifted down the hall, sharp, unfamiliar, and tinged with a lightness I hadn't heard in years, I felt the first faint crack in the foundation of my world. I didn't know it yet, but the photo album, the wedding portrait, even the glass of wine in my hand, were all about to become relics of a life that was already slipping through my fingers. I was tidying up the bedroom, something I often did to pass the time while Ellen worked late, when I noticed the corner of a receipt peeking out from under her side of the bed. I knelt to retrieve it, expecting nothing more than a forgotten grocery slip, but the words on the paper stopped me cold. The Silverleaf Inn, room 214, $189.99. The date was from last week, a night Ellen had claimed she was working late. My hands trembled as I turned the receipt over, my mind racing. The room was paid for with her credit card, and the name on the reservation wasn't hers. It was Thomas. The air in the room felt heavy, suffocating as I stared at the receipt, my chest tightening with a mix of disbelief and rage. Who was Thomas? How many nights had she lied to me, smiling as she kissed me goodbye, only to meet someone else in a hotel room? The walls of our home, once a sanctuary, now felt like a cage closing in around me. I crumpled the receipt in my fist, my jaw clenched, and knew there was no turning back. I had to confront her, even if it meant unraveling everything we'd built. I sat on the edge of our bed, the crumpled hotel receipt still clutched in my hand, the weight of its implications pressing down on me like a stone. If I confronted Ellen, I risked losing not just her but everything we'd built together. The home we'd shared for 20 years, the life we'd carefully constructed, and the fragile illusion of happiness we presented to the world. My pride, already wounded by the thought of her betrayal, warred with the fear of being alone, of starting over at 47 with nothing but questions and regrets. But the deeper I dug into my own emotions, the more I realized I couldn't let it go. The truth, no matter how painful, was the only thing that could set me free, or destroy me entirely. With a shaky breath I stood, my resolve hardening. I couldn't pretend I hadn't seen the receipt, couldn't ignore the gnawing suspicion that had taken root in my chest. I needed answers even if they shattered the life I'd known. Grabbing my jacket, I headed for the door, my mind racing with questions. Who was Thomas? How long had this been going on? And most importantly, how could I ever trust her again? I couldn't sit still. The receipt was just the beginning and I needed more, something concrete, undeniable. I called my younger brother, Ethan, who worked in IT and had always been the tech wizard of the family. Ethan arrived that evening with a grim expression and a small device in hand. If you're sure about this, Ethan said, I can help you track her phone. But once you go down this road, there's no turning back. I nodded, my jaw tight, and within minutes Ethan had synced Ellen's phone to an app on my tablet. The next morning I watched the little dot on the screen move across town, stopping at a cafe I didn't recognize. I drove there, my hands gripping the wheel, and parked a block away. Through the window I saw her, Ellen, sitting at a corner table with the same man from the photos. They were leaning close, laughing, her hand brushing his arm in a way that made my stomach churn. I snapped a photo with my phone, my hands trembling, but as I turned to leave, Ellen glanced up. Our eyes met through the glass and for a split second the world stopped. She looked startled, then angry, and I bolted back to my car, my heart pounding. Now I had proof, but it came at a cost. Ellen knew I was onto her, and the fragile balance of our life together was teetering on the edge. As I drove home, my mind raced with questions. How long had this been going on? Who was this man and what did he mean to her? And most importantly, what would I do now that the truth was staring me in the face? I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the photo I'd taken of Ellen and the man at the cafe. When she walked in, her face a mask of concern. "James," she said softly, placing a hand on my shoulder, "you've been so distant lately. Is everything okay?" Her voice was tender, almost pleading, and for a moment I wavered. Had I been so consumed by suspicion that I'd pushed her away? The guilt crept in, a quiet voice whispering that maybe this was my fault, that maybe I'd driven her into someone else's arms. But then I remembered the receipt, the photos, the way she'd laughed with that man, intimate, effortless, the way she used to laugh with me. My resolve hardened, but just as I opened my mouth to confront her, my phone buzzed. It was Ethan. I dug deeper into her emails. "There's a reservation for 2 at the Silverleaf in next weekend," under her name and his. My stomach dropped. She wasn't just lying, she was planning. The guilt evaporated, replaced by a cold, seething anger. But now I had a choice. Confront her now and risk her spinning more lies, or wait, gather more evidence and risk her slipping further away. I sat in my car outside the cafe, my hands gripping the steering wheel as I watched Ellen through the window. She was supposed to be meeting T, but instead she slid into a booth across from someone I knew all too well. Mark, my best friend since college. The man who'd helped me hack into her cloud account, who'd fed me information, who'd pretended to be on my side. My stomach churned as I saw Mark reach across the table, his hand lingering on Ellen's, their laughter carrying through the glass like a cruel joke. The pieces clicked into place with a sickening clarity. The late-night phone calls, the work trips, the way Mark had always been a little too eager to help. I felt the betrayal like a knife to the chest, twisting deeper with every second I watched them together. Mark wasn't just the lover, he was the architect of this entire charade, manipulating me into digging my own grave. The anger that had been simmering inside me boiled over, sharp and unrelenting. There was no turning back now. I had trusted Mark, and that trust had been weaponized against me. I started the car, my jaw clenched, my mind racing with a single burning thought. This ends tonight. I spent the next few days in a feverish haze, my mind consumed by the need to expose the truth. I installed a hidden camera in the living room, positioning it carefully to capture every angle, every word. I combed through Ellen's call logs, cross-referencing numbers with Mark's burner phone, each match a fresh wound to my already battered pride. The evidence piled up, texts, photos, timestamps, but it wasn't enough. I needed something undeniable, something that would leave no room for excuses or lies. I reached out to my sister, Claire, the only person I felt I could trust. Over coffee at her kitchen table, I laid out my plan. A family dinner hosted at her house, where Ellen and Mark would be invited under the guise of reconciliation. Claire listened in silence, her face a mix of concern and disbelief, but in the end she agreed. "Just be sure you're ready for what comes next," she warned, her voice heavy with unspoken worry. I nodded, but my mind was already racing ahead, imagining the moment I'd play the footage, the looks on their faces as the truth came crashing down. Sleep became a distant memory, replaced by restless nights and endless pacing. My hands shook as I rehearsed what I'd say, my anger simmering just beneath the surface, threatening to boil over. The cost of my obsession was mounting. Claire's wary glances, the kids' unanswered texts, the gnawing fear that I'd lose everything when the dust settled. But I couldn't stop now, not when I was so close. The dinner was set, the trap laid, and I was ready to burn it all to the ground if it meant getting the truth. The dining room was alive with the clatter of dishes and the hum of conversation, but I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff. I waited for the right moment, my heart pounding as Ellen laughed at something Mark said, her hand brushing his arm in a way that made my stomach twist. Finally I stood, the room falling silent as I held up the USB drive. "Before we finish dinner," I said, my voice steady but laced with tension, "there's something everyone needs to see." I plugged the drive into the TV and the hidden camera footage began to play. The room froze as Ellen and Mark appeared on the screen, their voices clear, their actions unmistakable. Ellen's face went pale, her hand flying to her mouth as she whispered, "James, please turn it off." But I didn't. I stood there, watching the reactions around the table. Claire's horrified gasp, the kids' stunned silence, Mark's guilty flinch. When the footage ended, I turned to Ellen, my voice cold and final. You lied to me. You lied to all of us. And now everyone knows. The room erupted, Ellen's frantic excuses, Mark's stammered apologies, the kids' tearful questions. But I felt a strange, hollow calm. I'd done it. I'd exposed the truth. But as I looked around at the shattered pieces of my family, the triumph was bittersweet. I'd won the battle, but the war had cost me everything. The room was a storm of emotions after the footage ended. Ellen's sobs broke the silence, her voice trembling as she reached for me. Please, let's talk about this, she begged, tears streaming down her face. But I stepped back, my expression unyielding. There's nothing left to say, I replied, my voice cold and final. Claire moved to my side, her arms crossed and her eyes blazing with fury. You did this to yourself, Ellen? She snapped, shoving a napkin into her sister-in-law's hands. Don't expect sympathy now. The kids, wide-eyed and pale, slipped out the back door without a word, their absence a silent wound that cut deeper than any argument. Ellen's parents lingered, their faces a mix of shock and disapproval. How could you do this, James? Her father demanded, his voice sharp. In front of everyone? I met his gaze, unflinching. The truth doesn't care about timing, I said, my tone steady. As Ellen grabbed her coat and fled into the night, I felt a strange mix of relief and sorrow. I'd reclaimed my dignity, but the cost was written in the empty chairs around the table and the quiet that now filled the house. I sat alone in the quiet house, the echoes of the confrontation still ringing in my ears. I was sorting through a stack of mail when a letter from a law firm caught my eye. My heart sank as I opened it, expecting more bad news, but the words on the page stopped me cold. Mark, it turned out, had been embezzling from our joint business for years, funneling money into offshore accounts. With Mark's exposure and arrest, the funds had been recovered and returned to me. The amount was staggering, a sum that could change my life. I stared at the check in my hand, the numbers blurring as my mind raced. The affair had cost me my marriage, my best friend, and the trust of my children, but now I had this, a twisted reward born from the same betrayal that had shattered my world. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd set out to expose the truth, and in doing so, I'd uncovered a fortune I never knew existed. But as I sat there, the weight of the check in my hand felt hollow compared to the life I'd lost. The money was a bitter consolation, a reminder that some victories come at a cost too steep to celebrate. I stood in the doorway of the now empty house, the silence pressing in around me. The divorce papers were signed, the furniture divided, and Ellen's absence was a palpable void. I wandered through the rooms, each one a ghost of the life we'd built together, until I reached the mantel. The silver-framed wedding photo was gone, tucked away in a drawer where I wouldn't have to see it every day. In its place was a small potted plant, a gift from Claire, its green leaves a quiet symbol of growth and renewal. The kids had texted once, a brief message asking for time, and though their distance hurt, I understood. I'd made my choice and now I had to live with the consequences. But as I sat on the porch that evening watching the sun dip below the horizon, I felt a strange sense of peace. The betrayal had shattered my world, but in its place, I'd found a strength I didn't know I had. The open sky stretched before me, vast and unbroken, a reminder that even in loss there was freedom. And for the first time in a long time I felt like I could breathe.